A truce in the trade war, but for how long? China and the U.S. may have declared a temporary ceasefire, but the G20 summit has now raised more questions than it answered. The truce mirrors the one declared 7 months ago, which eventually broke down, spurring fresh tariffs. How long before President Trump renews his threat of tariffs on more Chinese goods? Meanwhile, confusion surrounds the status of Huawei, the Chinese telecoms giant. While President Trump explicitly linked Huawei to trade negotiations, he backtracked on the proposed ban that would block U.S. businesses from supplying parts to Huawei. Did President Trump simultaneously undermine the official stance that Huawei poses a threat to U.S. national security? Joining us for the discussion in Beijing is Qinduo, a senior fellow at the Pangoal Institution, a think tank based in Beijing, and from Philadelphia, Blackburn-Dwyer, founder of the consulting firm Grasshopper Strategies. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. So, as I said, many observers suggest a parallel between this truce and the one agreed to in December last year after the G20 summit in Buenos Aires. So, Qinduo, do you now expect a similar pattern? I mean, a return to negotiations followed by a return to inevitable breakdown, followed by the imposition of new tariffs, or do you expect it to evolve differently?
I expect it to evolve differently in terms of the results, in terms of how it will go from here. Last time around, you have negotiation and then you have new tariffs. But for this time around, I tend to see there's no more new tariffs because the 300 billion remaining Chinese imports would be very difficult for the United States to impose tariffs because these are mostly consumer goods. Ordinary folks will be affected, and that will affect probably even the election of the President Trump. So that will be a big consideration. And also, for this time around, I think both sides more or less have mind of what we are going to achieve, especially for the Chinese side, better prepared, I would say.
Brandon, what's your take? Would you say the same thing, or do you have a slightly more pessimistic outlook on things?
I unfortunately am a little more pessimistic than my colleague. I love agreeing with Qinduo on most things, but I got to tell you that I'm a little more pessimistic, and here's why. In the near term, I agree with Qinduo that it is going to be incredibly difficult for the United States to really activate tariffs on that remaining $300 billion. And that's part of, I think, why President Trump went into this willing to sort of say, I'm not going to do it yet. But we're talking about a president that really doesn't care about the realities of the economic decisions he makes. He cares about the publicity he gets for doing them. And so he is going to, I think, sit back, bask in the glory that his temperament delivered this quote-unquote deal, which isn't really a deal. And we're going to hear in 3 to 6 months threats again, unless we really see a major breakthrough in negotiations that I'm frankly not expecting, and a lot of analysts aren't expecting in that time period. I see President Trump, by the time we get to November and the Democrats are campaigning for president actively in New Hampshire and Iowa and the like, that President Trump is going to want to refocus the national discussion on himself, and he's going to use China as one of the levers to do that. And whether we actually see the tariffs or not, I'm not sure, but I'm much more pessimistic that this is the last we've heard of them, and I think that we're going to be under threat of them more often than not for over the next year.
Brendan, yeah, we are still a bit of a distance away from the, the campaign, the elections of the second term of President, and how much is that timeline fitting into the kind of negotiation timeline between the two sides? I mean, if they reach an agreement too early, too soon, it becomes less useful, right? It probably can become a weapon in his opponents to attack him.
It absolutely is, and President Trump doesn't like giving anybody anything concrete to actually criticize. So unless he can get a deal that he feels like basks himself in glory sort of eternally, I would be very skeptical of him really accepting a deal. The other part of the timeline is just the economy in general. President Trump is basically at his whim able to influence the stock market. He can have the stock market drop by talking about tariffs. He can have the stock market go up by saying, actually, we're backing away from tariffs.
He's very powerful.
That's going to be the key. As long as he can goose the stock market, he'll want that.
Yeah, Qinduo, you want to add
also, you take a look at just concluded the G20 summit right there. He cares a lot about the farmers because that's the important part of his political base over there. They are desperate, and they say, he stressed very much, China agrees to purchase or immediately to purchase farm products, a lot of farm products from the United States. So that's a very positive image. He needs positive information. He needs to spur the support, continuous support for him from the farmers. So I think he cares. He cares about the election.
Yeah, he cares, of course. But it's all about the timing, and I'm not so optimistic that as we're still a bit of a distance away from the election, that things would just be too good too soon. But anyway, let's take a look at the Huawei twist, because according to what was reported from the Chinese media immediately after the meeting, that President Trump has decided to lift the ban on Huawei. Of course, when the Chinese media writes about it, they normally would have heard about it, right? Qinduo. Is there a misunderstanding in the two different versions? Because from President Trump, from his presser after the meeting, you hear a different version already. And then from Larry Kudlow, his economic advisor, it's again something slightly more different than what the Chinese understood that they were told about the Huawei case.
Well, exactly. This is a typical example of how difficult it is to handle the U.S. government, because it is not predictable. It is not. You are not hearing like one signal, one voice. You talk to different officials. Basically, you hear different versions.
So
of
exactly,
the story.
what is President Trump or the Trump administration going to do about Huawei?
I think from President Trump, that is, he's going to allow the U.S. companies to continue to supply the components to Huawei. But then it's really about the specific issue, what kind of products, and from which companies. So this is not specific. So right now, the more certain thing is really people are waiting for clearance from the U.S. Commercial Ministry here. That is like, what is the right line? Is there a bottom line here?
Okay. Well, according to a recent interview that was given by Larry Kudlow, the chief economic advisor to Trump, he says there will be sales from U.S. companies. It will only be in the sense of general merchandise that's available around the world. Anything to do with national security concerns will not receive a certificate from the Commerce Department, and there will be temporary license from the Commerce Department. We'll see. And then he also talked about the president said we'll fully address Huawei not until the end of the trade talks. So that will come last. At this moment, it's not the last word. Brandon, so what are we hearing here? Is Huawei a national security threat or not? And then what does it mean that we're going to hear about, we're going to address Huawei until the end of the trade talks?
Well, briefly, I've said on this show before that the last decade has seen the Bush administration, the Obama administration, and the early days of the Trump administration investigating, claiming, and putting pressure on Huawei for suspicions and concerns about national security. President Trump came into that mix and undercut all of it, because China has always dismissed this as political, and President Trump has basically proven that, at least in his eye, Huawei is only a political issue. He is using his belief that he basically told President Xi Jinping, that, hey, we're going to lift the ban, and then he went back and all of his advisors goes, whoa, 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 you can't do that. Legally, Congress is going to go crazy, everyone's going to go crazy. And he goes, oh, no, right, we're not lifting the ban on the national security, but we're going to give exceptions, and it's going to be only on commercial goods, it's not going to be national security. So he's trying to thread the needle to still sound tough, but basically let all these suppliers that have been begging to be able to sell products into the supply chain for Huawei to actually go ahead and do it, because A, it's good for the U.S. economy in the near and the long term, and it keeps Huawei afloat, and C, it actually gives President Trump another political chit in the ongoing trade tariffs discussions. What it does do, though, is it basically will make it almost impossible for the United States long-term to ever again separate the actual national security concerns around Huawei from the political. President Trump has smashed those two together and that is going to be irreparable damage to any legitimate concerns or efforts to separate the two issues down the road.
Well, the Chinese is, after all, not taking his words very seriously, or find it very difficult to take his words very seriously, right? The Chinese ambassador who was a Chinese diplomat who commented on it said, we'll see if his words follow through, then we welcome it. So, Qinduo, what kind of implication does that have on the kind of communication between the two?
I think the Chinese side is experienced in dealing with the Trump administration. You got to be really careful until it happens. Even it happens sometimes, you know, there could be a backtrack, and like what happened to Mexico, right? So you can't afford to be over optimistic about any promise or any words from this administration. I think it's difficult to deal with that. But again, it's really, I think, probably President Trump he himself does believe the Huawei incident, the Huawei issue is a political issue. It's not about a national security issue. It's about the competition. So he thinks like, we can make a Huawei as part of the trade deal.
And he says that let's wait till the end of the trade talks. Right. So that does feel like, another chip in my hand. Anyway, we're going to leave it there. Many thanks to Qinduo, Senior Fellow at the Pangoal Institution, and Brandon Blackburn-Dwyer, founder of Grasshopper Strategies. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Li Xin. Thanks for watching. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching.